If you're a fake job applicant trying to infiltrate the hiring pipeline, you'd better hope no one hands your resume to Deepanker Saxena. The head of product for Socure helps businesses monitor for fraud throughout the hiring process. I'm Joel McConvey, and on today's episode of the Biometric Update podcast, I talked to Deepanker about AI fraud attacks and how to stop them. Deepanker, we hear a lot about the deepfake crisis, but it seems to be concentrating now in a few areas, one of which is the hiring pipeline. Can you tell me a bit about how deepfakes are being used in this context?
I would broaden this up, and if we talk just about AI and how that is impacting the entire hiring pipeline, like the tools, and again, deepfakes is a part of this AI tool set. So one thing we are seeing a lot is how AI is being used to create fake resumes. You can actually go to a LinkedIn profile, find all the information about the person, put this in an LLM, put a job description in the LLM so that it gives you the exact skills that would pass through the basic screening checks of resumes. So that's one thing we are seeing a lot. Second, obviously, you can create these fake identities, the synthetic identities. You can steal identities from someone's LinkedIn profile. We have seen the headshot from the LinkedIn actually being in the resume as well. So everything seems actually perfect. But when you start interviewing, you realize this is not the same person. And with the AI, you can now do it at scale. So you don't have to think about making one resume. You are making 500 resumes at a time with all the job applications of 50 different companies. And you can now create agents to just apply to them. You don't actually have to go to each website to apply. You can just make an agent which just goes to all these websites, clicks a button, uploads resumes, fill in all the information, and just apply that. And now when we talk about some of the deepfake tools and AI tools on the video sites we are seeing is like some of the interviews that I did with fake candidates, we are seeing people using tools for obviously answering questions better, because you always have an LLM which is running, which is looking at the questions you're asking, listening to the questions you're asking, giving immediate answers. And there's always like, let me think. And in that, let me think, you actually have the answer coming up and you just answer what's on the LLM. We also see accent change tools, because there's a lot of people who have different ethnicity names, but obviously they don't have the same accent. And you could see the lag in the video of the audio. So there's 1 second or 2 second lag, or because there is a translation, there's actually an accent changing tool which goes in, which change the accent so you can actually hear this in different accent. So there's a lot of these kind of tools which are coming in, which is helping the resume, which is helping the hiring pipeline for people. Obviously, there are tools on deepfake videos where you can have a pre-injected videos, but it's obviously not as effective because you have to have a pre-recorded video. But there are tools on not as effective right now, but I think will be soon, is where you can have a face swap in a better way. Right now, it's more of a filter you can have in real time, but there will be a time very soon where at the pace at which the models are growing, we will be able to have a real time change of faces in the video.
So this really kind of goes from the, starts with the document side and goes all the way up through the pipeline. I mean, you're talking about fake resumes. That's effectively just forging a document of some kind. So, once an employee is in, if I can get through this whole gauntlet, what can I do inside an organization? What kind of damage can I cause?
So the big ones is obviously the access. Once you have access into the company's ecosystem and infrastructure, you can steal IP, you can steal sensitive information, especially companies like banks, especially companies where you have so much of sensitive PII information, someone's loan information. All these small bits of data can be sold. We haven't seen a lot, but a lot of bad actors do this for small paychecks as well. But I don't think it's about paycheck as much as it's about the data. And now we think about, there's obviously an IP risk. You're stealing all the IP from this company. But think about the scenario where you get like 50 spam emails every day and you do not open them because you don't trust the sender. Someone getting into the company, the first 5 minutes, if they send you an email which comes from at companyname.com, you are going to open that link because you now trust the sender. And that one link could have ransomware, could have a malware, could have these spam links, could be anything. So it's not about you staying there for 3 years to find all the IP information or 3 months to find it. It's just 3 minutes. The first email that sends out can actually bring down a lot of infrastructure behind the scenes. So there is a lot of that kind of information stealing, and also the impact you can make once you're inside the systems.
How much does social engineering play into this? I mean, you're talking about trust, and you're talking about a trusted email address. How are people exploiting these kinds of social structures to commit fraud?
So if we think about these biases that humans have on a different level, especially that's what the deepfakes and all the AI tools and fraudsters are actually exploit, right? An HR who is motivated to close this role faster. And if a fake candidate is like, I'm going to start next week, I'm out of job, I'm on a contract, I can start next week, you'll be more biased towards that candidate because you want to close this sooner. If you are going to the initial screening and they answer everything correctly, they are coming with companies like the fake candidates we saw were mostly coming from bigger company names. So you would be like, oh, this person actually worked at Meta, this person worked at Yahoo, this person worked at such big companies, this person has to be really good. And they actually answer these questions really, really well. So you would, by default, would have a bias. And sometimes they have, someone actually said they are from CMU and Stanford with both the highest GPA possible. It's like, that is really, really good if you were actually a real candidate. But when recruiters are not trained to handle these situations, so when you see a person coming with really good credentials, you're going to have a small bias towards that. And there's an interesting other part of it, which we now, since we have interviewed so many recruiters recently, there is also a negative bias to that too, because if you have seen 5 candidates, bad candidates coming from a particular college, you're going to stop taking applications from anyone who comes from that college. That impacts good people in the pipeline as well. So it's not just about the fake candidates, you're impacting some good people who actually had the good credentials to be in your company. So I think there is a lot of these biases which comes in. And there is also a lot of biases on how people respond and the confidence that people have. Because if someone is really confident about answering questions, you're just going to think that this person is really great. This is true. I mean, I'm answering these questions better. You're going to think I'm true. I'm not even be here. So that is just a lot of these biases which comes in. And as I said, and the humans by default, by biological ways, we just train to fall for these biases, and that's what get exploited by fraudsters a lot.
So, do things like this then become red flags? If I bring in a resume and says, oh, I've been to Harvard, MIT, I invented a rocket, I went to Mars. What are these things that you're looking at and going, okay, this is now problematic. This is suggesting it might be a fake resume.
So from a resume standpoint, we look at the risk signals associated with the individual to understand just from the PAI correlation. You can also check on the LinkedIn pieces. You can understand their educational background, if it makes sense or not. There are ways you can run background checks to understand that. But yeah, the red flags, I would say, is when you start looking at the entire pipeline of the hiring process. I don't think resume by itself gives you so many red flags. As you start interviewing people, one of the things we actually saw and was you have 3 interviews and there'll be 3 different people on every interview. Because one interview is, because all these interviews, they do a debrief, but they don't have the faces. They're not talking that this is the same person came back for these interviews or not. And these 3 interviews are aligned for different skills. One interview was actually about your behavioral skills. One interview was about technical skills. Now there'll be 3 different people doing all these 3 different rounds. And someone who shows up at the job is a completely different person. So that's why when you start looking at the entire pipeline of someone doing a resume, then interviews, then I-9, then actually coming to the job is when you start seeing these red flags. So resume by itself, obviously it's a big signal. What some of the things we're actually doing now is vectorization of resumes. Like, can you actually understand if this resume's content was repeated with different identity or not in a different company? So you can actually see the similarities of these resumes with different PIIs just by vectorization of it. You don't have to compare PI, just check how close the vectors are.
So can you tell me a bit more about what then a layered defense strategy looks like? You're talking about the entire pipeline. This means you've got to have defenses at sort of every step of the process. What is that, how does that unfold?
So how we have built this is when someone sends a resume, and by the way, there's also one interesting article I saw. There's a lot of times where fraudsters send a malware link in the resume as well. Because you would just click on a LinkedIn profile, but it's actually not a LinkedIn link. It's actually a malware link. So there is a lot of sanity check that has to be done before you even start looking at the resume. And as you look at the resume, you start and look at the name, the email correlations, the phone correlations, the address correlations to understand, is this identity on this resume, does it make sense or not? Is this actually a real person? Is it a synthetic identity? This is one of the things we have automated for our ATS systems, where it will give you low risk, high risk scores right in your hiring ATS, and that is how you start. Then we start looking at, as person is going through the interview processes. As I said, is it the same person coming back? You start looking at consistencies on their locations. You start looking, because as I said, if there are different people interviewing for the same job, again, 3 people coming for the 3 different interview rounds, you will have different locations, you will have different information for all this. So that is a consistency check you have to do. Then you start looking at, again, as you give an offer, we send a link for document-based verification. You check the liveness, you check deepfakes, you check, make sure the person actually is there and exists. It's not a presentation attack. If I have a stolen even ID, I have to have a live face. And if I put the live face from LinkedIn, make a deepfake video, that will be caught. But it doesn't end there, because you can still be a different person who shows up now. So as you show up, when you get access to the first-time access to the data and the systems, we do a re-verification to make sure the person who verified the documents is the same person who is now coming back to pick up the laptop or get access to the systems. So that selfie match, the biometric piece, is where it comes in. And a lot of our customers have actually, as you upgrade the level of access for a user, there's again biometric checks to understand if this is the same person being access to the higher level of access system or not. And an interesting thing which just came up in one of our use cases is also the profile image of that you have in your HR portals. That should be live. That should not be something you upload ideally. So it should be captured live with the SDKs to make sure it's not taken off someone's LinkedIn, it's not taken off someone's gallery uploads, it's a live picture. And that picture also becomes a reference that you can use later for repeated verifications. So the goal is, can you have a confidence that this is the same identity throughout the process? That is what we are trying to build, is have a persistent identity throughout the process, starting from someone sending a resume to getting access to repeated verifications if needed in a lot of use cases. Like gig works, like in the marketplace, others where you have to verify someone, because if you're driving a car, it has to be you every time. So those are repeated verifications that have to be done as well. So it's about how you have this whole layer and making sure at every step there is a consistency in this identity. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces that we have built, and we are trying to get it out in the market.
Is this a fixable problem? I mean, if this tool or others like it are deployed properly, can you get to the other side of it? Can we get to a point where this is not anymore, the problem it appears to be growing into?
I would say the tools are evolving way too fast for us to answer this question at any point. Like if I was to say I have solved a problem A yesterday, there are 15 tools today which are built to counter the exact same problem. And that is why the goal is to always keep adding new signals, always keep innovating on things we are doing. Can we look at more signals on ISP consistency? Can we look at more signals on interaction layer of it? Can we look at more signals on behavior? So our goal is to keep adding more signals, just because we want to stay ahead of what's going to come tomorrow. It's not about solving today's problem. It's about staying ahead of the problem that's going to show up tomorrow because of the pace at which tools are moving. But I think the biggest problem and how it could be solved is all these, as I said, all these different pieces are fragmented, and there is no bottom layer that is connecting it. And that's what we're trying to do, to have a consistent layer, a foundation layer, as I would say, for identity, where every interaction is linked to the previous interaction. So you would know this is the same person coming back. And so the whole idea of you need to verify someone and you have confidence is gone. Now you have to make sure you're verifying someone consistently, because verifying someone once is not enough anymore. You have to make sure every critical point of interaction, uh, every time there's a big change of behavior or signals, you have to re-verify someone to make sure this is the same person coming back or not. With the tools, it's just difficult to trust whatever you see right now. So I think the persistent identity and making sure the same person throughout the life cycle is how that's gonna work. So the network effect of that is where at least we are putting our bets on. And I've said that earlier a lot of times, is the biggest tool we have against all these AI attacks is also AI. So we just need to figure out how we use these tools, which are same tools available for the fraudsters, but it's just available to us as well. So how do we use these tools to stay ahead of them is what defines a lot of the strategies that we do and the thinking that goes behind our products.
So, it sounds sometimes to me like we've got this cycle. Fraudsters are innovating, and then there's innovation with AI to counteract that. And then fraudsters innovate, they respond. And it's sort of a dialectical back and forth. I was reading about MDLs today. NIST put out a guidance for their MDLs, and they, one of their things is you have to work towards stability on the standard side. But generally, the industry has to become less fragmented. It has to become more aligned. And there has to be a point at which sort of like that fluctuation between innovation and defense and whatnot flattens out. So do you think that's coming with Gen AI fraud? Are we getting to a plateau, or are we just at the beginning of this issue?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think I'll answer this two ways. So one, with MDLs and the cryptographic-based signature, I think that would solve a lot of the persistent identity problems, because once you bind an identity to a device, to a credentials, you can be re-verified with much more confidence than every time you're doing a separate verification. So I think that's a really good step. And again, we are working a lot towards that as well. We are working on reusable identity products as well. So there are a lot of products we are working on to move towards the direction of cryptographically signed credentials. With generative AI, I think in every field, it's not just identity. It's going to get a little more worse, and it is, because I have seen the growth in the last 1 year of how these tools have evolved. And like, if you see the example of Will Smith eating spaghetti video, but 2 years ago it was, and how it is now is just so different and so evolved. And I think it's not just impact on identity; it's an impact on, like, we're working on age assurance product. We have to make sure we're keeping the kids safe on the social media. I'm hearing so much, and one of the presentation I recently did was around how AI influencers are just taking over the social media. You have more AI individuals than actual individuals in social media now, and that has a big impact on how people respond to things, how people respond to news, how people respond to different things that comes out. You just cannot trust a lot of the things that is out there. So from a very wider perspective, I think there's a lot coming. But I'm also glad there are a lot of people, folks, and our peers in the industry who are working towards making sure we're keeping things safe as well. But it's I think it's a lot of impact of AI is in very varied spaces, which would eventually, as I said, would be tied to an identity at some point. Because even if you have an AI influencer, it has to be a tick mark on Meta. Is it tied to an identity or not? If an agent is actually doing a transaction on your behalf, buying shoes for you, is it tied to an identity or not? So I think the identity becomes a foundation layer in the future to actually trust what's true, what's not. And that's why it's very important that we are safeguarding that layer of verifications.
And since you mentioned age assurance, I'll just ask, because it's a super hot topic these days. It seems like all of this stuff, identity, age verification, age assurance, it's all kind of converging. Everyone is seeing the same opportunities, and it's kind of the same core tech in a lot of the ways. So is this all eventually going to become the same thing? When you say like identity will be the base layer, are we just sort of moving to a world in which identity is how I shop, how I prove my age, how I, is it going to be this? Will it replace the smartphone, for example, with some entity that represents who I am?
I would hope in an ideal world, yes, where you actually are able to prove your identities at one place and you don't have to prove it everywhere. And especially and like right now, there is more bot traffic on the internet than human traffic at this point. So yes, I think in a good ideal world, there has to be a way where someone is just verified, uh, individuals and even the agents and everything that is tied to a central identity. Will it replace the phones? No. But I think hopefully there would be, and again, we are trying to build it in a way with our usable identity where is we have 3,000 customers. And if someone goes from one to another, they don't have to verify themselves again. That could be us saying this person is actually Deepanker and you can trust this person now. Is the goal that and that could be age, that could be your agents doing something, that could be any use case that you might require, could be you verifying once and then that trust certificate is being reused across different things that you're doing on the internet.
That makes sense. Yeah. A less abstract question on age assurance. It's taking hold in Europe, in the UK. Australia obviously has the age assurance law already in place. The US is kind of a different landscape because you've got this fractured legal environment state to state. How have you found that ecosystem developing from a US perspective, as you see it unfolding?
I think it's a lot of advancements happening every day. We have to keep a track of what's happening across the US, across the world, literally every day at this point, especially with age regulations. And it's a little fragmented with different states trying to do the best they can for their folks in those states. So I appreciate everyone's efforts to, again, I like that everyone's goal is to protect the kids. That's one common ground for everyone. And I love that fact. How you make sure someone is actually them and not is not a minor is just varying with different states. And we are trying to provide that as multiple options to our customers. Like if you're in this state, you can use a selfie-based age estimation. If you are in this state where the requirements are different, you can use a phone number-based age assurance. In certain states, you have to do a document-based IL2. So we are on our side at this point, we are trying to provide multiple options to our customers. And through our Risk OS platform, you can port that to different states and create these much, much easier than you have to code. So at this point, trying to understand these growing regulations, our goal is to provide all the different options to our customers for them to comply with different regulations of different states till we get to a point where we have a unified way across all 50 states on how this age assurance should be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another interesting example of the journey from multiplicity towards something a little more stable and standardized.
It happened with MD. It happened with MDLs. Yeah. So there's interoperability now. So hopefully, as we have more conversations about this, we should hopefully align on age assurance as well.
I saved the most important question for last here. Does Socure still give out your wonderfully colored socks as swag?
We do. And interestingly, in this SDA conference, the box we had for all the socks got lost, and we could not give out the socks. But yes, it was a shipping issue. But yes, we do give out the socks. I have the new pair of shoes now, which are also orange. So, good. But we do give out the socks.
I think you may have found the antidote to losing one sock in the dryer, because it's always just like, oh, there it is, I can see it.
I can find my Socure socks so easily in the house. It's just so easy.
Yeah. Thanks to Deepanker Saxena of Socure for sharing his insights today. And thanks to you for listening. To learn more about Socure, visit Socure.com. And for all the latest news on biometrics and digital ID, be sure to check out www.biometricupdate.com.